Hello and welcome back to Tiny Bunny. I hope audio is a bit better this time. I turned down some of the music and fiddled with the settings a bit, but either way, I'm very curious about the next episode, so let us get right in. Episode 2. Time to play with you. New school, new teachers, and most importantly, new classmates who I always have trouble connecting with. Like most other kids with glasses, probably. I forced myself to get out of my warm bed. Dad would usually drive me to my old school, but this morning the bedroom of my parents was silent. Did they sleep in? Maybe it was a good thing. I didn't want to get the daddy's boy reputation from day one. My parents were probably still tucked in, dreaming about the good old days when everything was so simple and easy. Sweet dreams, even if far removed from reality. I silently sneaked out to the first floor so I wouldn't wake up anybody, especially the peacefully sleeping Olya. I did my best to step on the middle of every floorboard. I used to play like this even in our old apartment. If my soles touched the space between floorboards, it counted as stepping into lava. The clock was spurring me on with its hands. I need to hurry. Faster. Faster. I was too fast, so I needed to circle the hallway once again. Boiling lava was bursting out of the cracks between floorboards. I needed to watch my step, to survive at any cost. Hippity-hop, like a frog jumping on molehills, like a fearful bunny in a grove full of wolves. I made a sandwich in the kitchen, shoved it down my throat, and drank it down with cold tea. My appetite was as good as of someone being led up the scaffold toward a guillotine. I lowered my gaze and saw that one of my feet was standing on two floorboards at the same time. Burned to a crisp, huh? I moved my foot. Disgusting little snakes writhed in my belly. Fear of getting hit and being called nasty names. The clock clicked. I need to go. It was dark outside, fitting for an early winter morning. This darkness never fully left the houses around here. I took my time tying my shoes, buttoning up the puffy down jacket, trying to delay my unpleasant exit into the semi-dark, into the unnerving unknown. I rubbed my glasses for good luck, though I couldn't remember a single time these thick pieces of glass brought me any good fortune. The sky was akin to a giant bruise. On the east side of it, a black cloud was swelling up. It licked up stars from the sky and extinguished the rising sun. Darkness was plastered all over the treetops. The cautious cries of birds got tangled up in the thicket. I locked the front door with a long key that I wore around my neck. My parents made me wear this noose, afraid that I, being a total klutz that I am, could lose the key otherwise. I mean, how old is he? When I was in elementary school, I also wore my key around my neck. That was just the thing you did as a kid. Also, I had a really cute, dinosaur charm with it, so I didn't mind. But really, how old is he? I don't remember. Oh well. The wind whizzed on the other side of the gate. It invited me into my new life, toward dubious adventures. And tagged alone like an old buddy, pushing me in the back. White shadows that pines threw out covered a third of the clearing. Upon reaching the edge of the forest, I hid my nose in my coat's collar. I was squeezing through the thin fire break, my hair ruffled up and my back hunched over. Tall trees stood on both sides of the tiny trail. The snowy blanket rustled under my feet, and the canopy of intertwined branches above my head cut me off from the already sparse starlight. The night had no plans of moving away from the forest. In this darkness, trees reminded me of shaggy old women that smelled of burial earth. Their trunks turned into cracked, wrinkled faces with holes in the middle as their mouths. If I lost focus even for a moment, mold-covered witches would drag me into the forest's depths. Then my parents would be walking around these parts, screaming my name. But the dead can't answer the living. Or can they? A sense of panic was growing in my chest. I was fine with Dad carrying me into the school in his hands by now, if it saved me from watching the darkness rise up in the ravines like black dough. It felt like someone jumped into the bushes behind me, so I turned around. As soon as I started walking faster, I heard the snow squeak behind me. The forest took a deep breath with its giant lungs. The windfall cracked. The wind and the birds were left behind in the field. Now I could only hear the forest creak. I walked, listening closely, and the unseen presence grew stronger. As if someone was following me, trying to match the pace of my footsteps. I turned my head so fast it made my neck crunch. A tiny trail behind me disappeared into the darkness. Tree branches overlapped, forming a natural tunnel.
Есть здесь кто?
The question escaped my lips and dissolved into the unending creaking sound of the wooden idols, the pines around me. Why did I think going through the forest alone was a good idea? I'm either going mad, or someone had intentionally lured me away from home. Distant lights granted me a smidgen of hope. A country road. I ran there as fast as I could, as if afraid that the trail will shrink. Clawed hands will grip me by the shoulders, turn me around, and make me look at the faces of hungry forest denizens. In the end, nobody stopped me. I almost flew to the decrepit wooden bridge, disbelieving my luck. The bridge's supports bathed in a spring, tarry and ice-cold. I put my hands on my knees and looked up at the forest. Then snorted, trying to calm my breathing. The thicket was pretending to be asleep. It looked peaceful, lifeless. The remaining part of my commute lied through a snow-laden road, illuminated by sparse lamplights. I chased away bad thoughts and ran as fast as I could, from one circle of light to another, seeking protection from electric lamps. Just like in that game, where you need to be the first to proclaim, "I'm protected." Tag, a kid's game where one player needs to tag other players by touching them with the hand, making them it. In certain zones, normally called the Google, players can stay safe from tagging. It's kind of like a game that's known internationally, right? It's just in this case that protection was flimsy at best, with darkness writhing outside its bounds. Then I noticed something remarkably eerie. In a place where the light from an inclined lamp couldn't reach, a hairy, crooked shadow came alive with a guttural roar. It almost felt like its features deterred light, its unnatural pose instilled fear. My eyes almost popped out of their sockets as I just stood there, blinking, trying to chase away the delusion. But the shadow didn't disappear, and even got closer. My insides were gripped by horror. I stepped back and almost fell into a snow pile. The black silhouette on the other hand, straightened up and addressed me in a sweet voice.
Чего крадешься? Душу мою украсть хочешь?
Words got stuck in my throat. Who could be talking in such a silky voice here, between the forest and the dormant village?
Чего молчишь, несмышленыш? Язык вырвали? Слушай, а я тебе еще и нос откушу. Будешь знать, как совать его в чужие дела.
A girl stood before me, judging from the voice and the silhouette. The silhouette, really? Okay. But I couldn't even reprimand myself for getting scared by a girl before noticing a gaping mouth under her hood with something dangerously shiny inside. I was stunned. From the cavity of her hood, a frighteningly real fox face was staring right straight at me. It's just her jaws weren't moving, and her eyes weren't blinking. A mask. It's just a girl with a fox mask on. At least I wanted to think that. After a surprise like that, a nervous smile involuntarily crept onto my face.
А я просто в школу иду, а тут ты. Что я? Никогда не видел, как лиса собаку кормит?
And indeed, there was a small dog circling the girl's legs. One of the strays that were chasing me yesterday, probably.
Извини, я не хотел.
After hearing my voice, the dog whimpered, lowered its ears, sniffed me out, and then started wagging its tail. I guess I still smelled of bologna that I ate for breakfast. I was shifting my gaze back and forth from the dog to the girl. She didn't seem scary anymore, just weird.
Значит, не хотел. Ну-ну. Как тебя зовут? Меня Антон. А тебя? А меня нет!
She's weird. Definitely has a couple loose screws. But she has a nice voice. My astonishment has turned into a mix of happiness and relief. This girl I didn't know was definitely human, if a bit eccentric. I was also a bit angry at myself. This foxy girl was walking through the darkness without problem, and I shuddered from every little sound. I could just walk away, but this girl had piqued my interest. The next time a police officer asks me about my friends at the new place, I'll tell him that I befriended a talking fox. And that will go over great.
Ты здесь живешь? В поселке?
The fox giggled and purred. She spun around so hard the hem of her coat lifted up.
Нет, глупый. Лисы не живут в поселках.
Хочешь сказать, ты живешь в лесу?
Из какой норы ты вылез? Конечно! Лисам среди людей не выжить. Пока они лисы.
Her jokes were also weird. Just like a carnival mask, papier-mâché with fur glued onto it. The dog reminded us of its existence with a loud bark. I unfastened my backpack. Dad would sometimes throw food in there without my knowledge. Cookies, apples, or even my favorite crab sticks. He called it a gift from the bunny. Treat from the bunny, the uneaten part of a business lunch or a treat specifically bought for children. Parents would tell their children that a bunny asked them to deliver said treat, but it could also be any other animal, a squirrel or a bear, for example. That's cute. The stray strolled toward me with mincing footsteps, with a pleading look in its eyes. The fox did definitely treat it to something, but it was probably still hungry. I mean, dogs eat as much as you give them, right?
Зачем ты так вырядилась с утра пораньше? На утренник идешь?
The girl shrugged, throwing silvery snowflakes off her nose. And her human form along with them, turning into a genuine beast. A real fox, agile, cunning, dangerous. A moment of hesitation and you'll be ripped to shreds. She'll tear you up and gulp you down without breaking a sweat. I couldn't help but just stand there as a stump. Until I heard her calm, melodic laughter hidden underneath the beastly mask. You call that calm laughter, okay.
Видел бы ты свою маску, сладенький.
Sweet. Did she say sweetie? I got embarrassed. Went red up to my hair roots. That's what you latched onto? I found the your mask part a bit more chilling, but okay. We'd seen a fox in a zoo once, when we went there with Dad, but it had patchy fur, was grey and skinny. But this girl was of fiery color and furry, just like in fairy tales. I was still rummaging through my backpack. My fingers, that were searching for the dog's treat, stumbled upon some soft, crumpled object.
Ничего. Скоро проснутся настоящие звери. Спроси-ка лучше у них, где они взяли свои человеческие лица.
The girl's shadow was dancing in the lamp's light. The dog yapped in agreement. I freaked out and dropped my finding in the snow without getting a proper chance to examine it. Cold wind instantly covered the hole it created with snow. The dog rushed to dig it out, wanting to get its treat. And the fox just snorted. Now I was so embarrassed I wanted to sink through the snow. It was still dark outside of the electric circle. On the contrary, the darkness seemed even more thick. All neighboring houses were sleeping deeply in its inkiness. I did my best to continue the conversation with the weird girl I didn't know.
Так ты в школу идешь?
Ах, ну какой Дурачок! Так ничего и не понял?
Welp, I was trying to be friendly, but she can't stop mocking me. Calling me a dummy and all. I should have just moved along without paying any attention to this weirdo and her stupid dog. Hey, the dog didn't do anything.
А ты чего обзываешься? Не хочешь отвечать, и пожалуйста. Никто не требует.
Still, something froze me in place, tugged me toward the dark figure. A mysterious appearance, a voice that was velvety and just languid enough. I was intrigued and excited. I watched her as people watch fires burn.
Ой, да не дуйся! Гляди-ка лучше. Ты нравишься Жульке.
The dog was digging through snow with sharp movements, snoring loudly. The fox turned around and looked at the windows of a nearby house, at its timbered front through the white mist. The tip of her fake nose was shining under the lamp's light.
И не только ей.
I went red again, like a boiled crayfish this time. Is she talking about herself or someone else? I hoped that the semi-dark would be able to hide my embarrassment from the girl. I cleared my throat before asking.
А кому еще я нравлюсь?
I waited, counting my heartbeat. The fox didn't reply. Her sly stare was scanning the frosty patterns of someone's windows. She was reading them like a glass book. I wonder what she can see in those winter paintings. The stray stopped rummaging through the snow. It ran to me, holding my object in her jaws. A mitten. Could it be the one I found in the forest? What is it doing here? When I looked closer, I realized that it was just my mitten. Maybe Mom stuffed it in there when I was asleep? A certain missing boy immediately came to mind.
Эй, ты знаешь что-нибудь про Вову?
I imagined the scene, silhouettes dancing in the clearing. The dance of the night when Vova had disappeared. A boy who, when found, can provide a big reward and maybe save my family. I remembered my birthday, when our parents promised to take me and Olya to Disneyland in Paris. But instead of a long-anticipated gift, they gave me a simple brick game console, visibly embarrassed. I was crying my eyes out back then, demanding to take me to the promised amusement park. That was the first time when Mom and Dad had a big fight. My greediness shattered their relationship. If only I could fix everything. Gather everybody I love and take them to Disneyland.
В ночь, когда пропал Вова, я, кажется, видел, как кто-то похожий на тебя плясал под моим окном.
It couldn't be true, but I felt like her mask became even more sly. The fox was sniffing me out.
А что, ты тогда испугался? За себя или кого-то еще?
Olya, as soon as I thought about my sister, my chest tightened and cold sweat streamed down my spine.
Ну так слушай меня внимательно, мальчик по имени Антон. Это большой и страшный лес.
The fox girl stepped forward menacingly.
И я не единственный его обитатель. Другие звери уже знают о тебе. Берегись нас. Этой ночью мы опять придем.
I shouldn't have talked to this evil in child form, I thought, panicking.
Пока ты со своей семьей будешь спать, подкрадемся близко-близко и станцуем. Макарену!
Wait,
Чё?
Эй, Макарена!
no. Oh, come on.
У тебя прямо челюсть отвисла, Антоша! Видел он меня ночью у своего окна, ага, как же! А ты случаем не местный дурачок, нет? Меня не отпускают гулять так поздно. Здесь, знаешь ли, дети пропадают.
I touched the plastic frame of my glasses, puzzled by her silly joke. She got me scared to death.
Ой, да не тереби ты окуляры свои. Я раньше тоже близорукой была. Лучше послушай меня. Может быть, ума наберешься. Лисичку как обычно называют?
Плутовка?
My words seemed to hurt her.
Ох ты ж! Да как ты меня?
Ой, прости.
Her laughter was akin to the jingle of a pair of silver bells.
Да шучу я! Конечно, плутовкой. Если ты ловкий и смелый, не боишься с плутовкой водиться, я, так и быть, помогу разыскать этого Вову. Ты же неспроста его ищешь, да?
I shrugged in reply. Her insight was alarming.
Знаю, почему дети повадились соваться в наш лес. Порой там можно найти много всякого интересного. Я вот однажды нашла целый сугроб конфет и купалась в нем, да так что челюсть слиплась.
A pile of candy. I couldn't deduce whether she believed in what she was saying from the tone of her voice. I showed her another smile, a fake one this time.
Посмотрите-ка, какой недоверчивый. Ну-ну, а что ты на это скажешь?
She held out her hand in a furry mitten. There was an assortment of sweets in her palm. In the city where I used to live, sweets like these were sold at markets or in kiosks. Kiosks, small container-type shops selling a wide assortment of products from bubblegum to vodka, clothing, or even home appliances. These types of shops were popular in 90s Russia, and more often than not tied to criminal organizations. Okay, good to know. I saw my favorite bubblegum in a vivid wrapper among the tasty treasure. A familiar name was on it, Turbo. A triangular fox face poked her nose toward me.
Угощайся. У меня их полные карманы.
Okay, refuse or take candy from the strange fox girl. What a choice. I mean, she is weird, but she doesn't really seem to harm us. I think I'm still going to make a save, just in case, and because I like to do that with these games. Yeah, I mean, sure. Okay, so if we take something, then we might be like indebted to her, but like over a piece of bubblegum or candy. Shouldn't be too bad, right? I accepted the treat, and catching a whiff of the girl's smell, fur, fireworks, and citrus, the smell of holidays. My fingers tingled while I was carefully unwrapping the gum. Peachy aroma entered my nostrils, and something else, something unfamiliar, but pleasant. The fruity cube ended up in my mouth. I started moving my molars, chewing the gum. It tasted like your usual Turkish gum, only my tongue went a bit numb. I couldn't believe my luck after opening the insert. Bubblegum inserts games. The type of game where players put bubblegum inserts into their palm and try to flip it by throwing it in the air. The player who happens to flip one or more inserts claims them as their prize. Those inserts were often considered as collectibles. Yeah, I remember collecting like stickers and stuff like that from gum wrappers, but I didn't know people used this as a game. People, or kids rather. Mercedes-Benz. I looked at a Mercedes-Benz, an extremely rare and hence desirable collector's item for any boy from my previous neighborhood. My heart skipped a beat. I was barely able to tear my eyes off the insert, still stunned.
А это же... Это...
Теперь понял, что можно найти в лесу? Только на твоем месте я бы туда в одиночку не ходила. Тебе вон от жвачки в забу дыханье сперло. А представляешь, что с тобой будет, если найдешь чемодан таких фантиков? Голову напрочь снесет, и пиши пропало.
Unusual treats. Just like everything else about her. I carefully hid the insert in my bag, as if I was putting a rare butterfly in a can. The fox giggled. This is not how things are supposed to go on a Monday morning. Who are you? Sweet is the achievement we got. I refrained from asking that question. She wouldn't answer anyway, or she'll just lie. I really wanted to see what's behind her mask. I was becoming more and more sure that underneath it wasn't just a simple young girl.
Может, Вова тоже нашел сугроб сладостей и теперь кувыркается в нем? Слушай, вдруг он решил остаться в лесу? Тогда, наверное, ему очень холодно в одной варежке.
The wind caught her words like smoke from a fire and carried them deep into the darkness, into the creepy thicket. The trees behind me creaked with their bony branches.
Или с ним что-то случилось в пути. Что-то страшное.
The forest reacted to her words, became alive. It sniffed me out, perking up its ears, just like a curious beast. The fox girl pierced me with her eyes again.
Дикие звери?
Это, по-твоему, страшно?
Ну, не знаю.
Не знает. Уж не с двоечником ли я подружилась?
I didn't like being called a dunce, yet being friends with her sounded nice. Anton, I think you're a bit desperate here.
Я хорошист.
Бел да пушист. Пойдешь со мной, хорошист Антон? Найдем твоего Вову и сам его спросишь, что он нашел в этой пуще. Ведь пока мы вместе, никто тебя в лесу не тронет. Вот увидишь.
Worms of worry writhed in my belly. Better run, whispered my mind.
Я тебе не верю.
Думаешь, я врунья? Да и пожалуйста, мне никогда никто не верит.
The girl sounded hurt, although I didn't know if she was genuine about it. She turned around as if she had immediately lost all interest in me. The gum felt bitter now. I remembered my dad's favorite saying, "Where are your manners, son?" Indeed, this fox was kind to me. She gave you candy, but she's also mocking you all the time, so I don't know if that really can be considered kind.
Не обижайся, пожалуйста. Лисы бывают и добрыми. Ну, как в сказках. Мне бы только понять, что ты за лиса.
The girl giggled, hiding the nose of her mask in her hands.
Тогда пойдем со мной в лес, и ты все обо мне узнаешь. Но не сейчас, а когда рассветет. А то тебя, бедного, всего аж потряхивает.
Yeah, I don't think we would have gone with you into the forest at night. We have school.
Того и гляди, кондрашка хватит. Ай да, провожу тебя до школы.
After hearing this, the dog barked in agreement and stopped messing with the mitten. I leaned in, trying to grab the piece of handwear that almost ran away from me.
Ну, если тебе по пути...
We went toward the school and the lost dawn. Here and there, the lights came on in the windows of houses we passed, as if their inhabitants were sending us warning signs. Silhouettes lurked behind curtains. Dogs let out occasional barks. Spirals of grey smoke rose from chimneys. TVs bustled and dishes clanked in kitchens. We watched the village slowly rise from its slumber, while carefully treading the snowy wheel trails. I walked in the left one, and she took the right one. The dog was following right behind us. I expected the fox to bring up something weird again, but she stayed silent all the way to the school, as if playing with me some game only she was privy to. She would only giggle from time to time when the dog sneezed from the snowflakes that fell on its nose. I was the first to break the silence.
Так как тебя зовут?
Ну конечно. Имена, имена, имена. Людям непременно надо вешать ярлыки на все подряд. Ну и как бы ты назвал такую лису, как я?
Даже не знаю. Но я читал про лису по имени Алиса.
А что? Я не против. Пусть будет Алиса.
I couldn't understand if she was joking or not. I turned around as if looking for an answer from the dark sky devoid of dawn. My silent questions were left unanswered. The school's outline was already in our sight. A giant brick box stuck in the endless night. Lights in its windows didn't bode well for me. The warden trees were guarding the schoolyard. Screams, childish laughter, and someone's whistling tore up the silence. I went here with Mom when we just moved, and the place looked cozy at the time. Empty corridors that smelled of polish, puffy snow outside. The second time I came alone to get the books and just kept on imagining my peers rolling down the railings, grade schoolers running to the library, and teachers marching down the corridor with the air of self-importance around them. High schoolers were smoking at the entrance, and track pants and wool caps perched on their foreheads. Their appearance destroyed the last hopes for a cozy school. Their stingy eyes and the teeth yellow from nicotine, the smirks, all of it had the same gloomy effect as the cloudy winter morning. Absorbed by my thoughts, I completely forgot about my companion.
После уроков жду тебя на заднем дворе. Возле повешенного.
Возле кого?
She just ignored my question.
Не опаздывай.
I hesitated. Blowing hot and cold again, Mom always said that when I would have trouble choosing between two options. Thinking about Mom helped me reply.
Я после школы сразу домой.
Эх, Антоша, Антоша, это я тебя так просто отпустила. Другие же незаметно подкрадутся со своими улыбочками и вцепятся. Клещами не оторвешь. Попомни мои слова.
The fox opened her mouth in a wide yawn. What kind of trick is this?
Антоха!
Someone in the distance called out my name. I instinctively turned around. Whoa! A huge snowball whizzed past my shoulder and hit the dog. Excuse you? It whimpered and ran toward the spring. The darkness devoured it. The fox girl was also nowhere to be seen. She dissolved into frosty air. Or was she hiding in my shadow? I gulped and swallowed the gum. Unlucky. Well, that sure wasn't a mask, was it? Or it was a very elaborate one, if you could see the whole mouth move like that. And I'm not sure if we can trust her. She was... well, it was only harmless mocking. She wasn't harming us, it seems. But going into the forest with her, I don't know about that. And also, she seemed to know about Volva's mitten, or, well, the mitten we found. She made a reference to that, you know? Then again, is Anton maybe just imagining her? I don't know. After taking a deep breath, I went toward the school, toward the cutlets in dough, toward the light raining down onto the snow. That startled me. There was a fresh-looking Volga parked nearby, with one of its front wheels perched up on the icy curb. Black like soot. Soot? Soot? As if it was straight out of the horror story Dad loved to tell me when we hid in the attic during a thunderstorm. I remember him always wearing a sad smile while mentioning the black car that snatched children. He would say, "It looks like a funeral car on the outside, white curtains and all. And it has DSC in its license plate. Do you know what that means? Death to Soviet children." Funny, I was born in the USSR too. I don't think that's funny at all. Whose nest is this, I wonder? A thieving magpie? Then it probably has all sorts of shiny things in it. Pieces of colorful glass, bottle caps, polished coins, or child braces. Okay. What else is there to look at? Just this guy and the boys. A tall man was standing near the gate, puffing out clouds of smoke into the wind. He didn't look like a teacher. Was he a PE guy, maybe? I carefully studied his face that looked like it was cut from a piece of granite, and his hair lip that was holding down a cigarette. He was playing around with car keys and staring back at us. The light from the cigarette was reflected in his eyes that were sitting deep in his eye sockets. I froze in place. The hulking man lazily tore off his eyes from us and walked toward the road. Okay, weird. And high schoolers are allowed to smoke here in the school premise? Interesting. A buzzing crowd of upperclassmen with their winter hats tipped to the side. I'd better not draw their attention. Okay, I think that's it. Yeah. Then let's get to the real horror and enter the school. I could hear muffled voices behind the doors, saw blinking lamps. Darkness creeped along the windows, and it felt like the school was drifting in open space, like a lonely, lost spaceship. After going up to the second floor, I noticed a crowd around the notice board. Everyone was taking part in a lively discussion. I moved closer and took a look at something everyone was interested in through a wall of backpacks. There was a piece of paper with something printed on it glued to the left of the notice board. Attention, child missing. Vova Matyukin, 10 years old. Vova, 10 years old, grade 4B. He left his home on January the 5th around 4 and never returned. Was last seen at the bridge over the Smorodina River. He was wearing an orange coat with a hood, a black wool cap, a scarf and mittens with green stripes. Might have had a plastic toy gun on him. Features: 142 centimeters tall, skinny, brown hair and green eyes. Please call these numbers if you have any information on Vova's whereabouts. Police and Vova's parents. Child missing. Vova Matyukin, that was his name. A 4th grader. On that grainy print, Vova looked dead, with a black mouth and dark, empty eye sockets. Could it be that the darkness dwelling deep in the forest invaded his pores and mutilated his face? A plastic toy gun couldn't protect him from the whispering branches and the howling wind. Empty eyes of the lost boy pierced through my soul, as if pleading. Unable to meet his stare, I turned around and rushed to the window, took a seat on the windowsill. The corridor was slowly filling up with children, in groups of few. Nobody paid me any mind. In the darkness of school toilets, child voices were hammering a nursery rhyme.
Для медведя, для лисы, зайчик кушать принеси.
I turned my head toward them, trying to get a better look at their features, but then my attention was stolen by a loud clicking sound. A female teacher marched down the corridor with her chin raised up high. Her heels were hitting the floor like miniature hoofs. A girl was trailing her every step. She was also looking pompous, stopping along the way and whispering some secret in a friend's ear. She was probably a class rep, since she was carrying an attendance register book.
Екатерина, возьми, пожалуйста.
The teacher opened the classroom door, and the crowd of children swarmed in, screaming and pushing. Out of all of them, a tall, red-headed fat boy caught my attention. His face was full of blisters. He looked like the insides of a pomegranate. A bad feeling risen up the hair on the back of my head. I've seen boys like him before. Unsettled eyes, cackling laughter. The girl, who was a smaller copy of the teacher, warned the boy with a wave of her hand and entered the room through the clearing in the crowd. Some other guy stood in the way of the crowd, and the redhead immediately shoved him.
Топай резче, мудила!
The boy flew head first, flailing his hands, trying to keep his balance. The fatso burst out laughing, and a couple of kids joined his nasty cackling. Their laughter sounded like someone was snipping with huge garden scissors. The classroom sucked all of the kids in. The corridor stood empty. I wanted to grow roots and stay on the windowsill. Just a handful of lampposts outside were battling the darkness, writhing like fluorescent fish in the black ocean. Maybe I can still run away? Go outside, dissolve in the dark. I imagined myself running through snow, how it squeaks under my boots, and time becoming lighter and lighter with every step. The ringer's drill blew that illusion away. I tore myself from the window with great effort. Then took a couple of deep breaths, trying to at least calm down my mad pulse, and entered the classroom. The prim teacher looked at me over the frame of her glasses, clearly annoyed.
Я новенький. Мне вот сказали к вам подойти.
The snowy forest trail was winding in front of my eyes. The pines rustled, but it didn't sound predatory anymore. She buried herself in the register and flicked through the pages.
А фамилия-то как?
Петров.
Громче говори. Чего мямлишь?
God, I hate teachers like that. Or people like that in general.
Петров.
Нет такого.
She measured me with a long and heavy stare, as if trying to see if I was lying. I wanted to sink through the floor. Hazy faces observed all of that from the left. The classroom breathed and snorted in unison, like a living organism, like a dangerous beast.
Ты не ошибся? Нет такого в списке.
My knees chose the worst time to start shaking, and I felt dizzy. I clutched my fists so hard my knuckles became white.
Мне сказали, 204 кабинет, Лилия Павловна, 6 В.
Apparently, everyone in the classroom took my words for some sort of joke, because they were all laughing.
Что за бардак?
The classroom fell silent. The kids hid their smirks for a better occasion.
Понаберут студентов. Только знают, что губяки свои малевать. А я разгребай, значит. А бумаги-то кто заполнять будет? Не первый раз ведь уже.
I get that can be annoying, but you don't need to take it out on the child in front of the whole class, okay?
Подожди здесь. Сейчас. Сейчас я им устрою.
Can you not start class and sort this out afterwards? The teacher flew past me, mumbling something to herself in righteous anger, and I was left standing at the center of the classroom. Like a convict in front of a firing squad. I lowered my gaze, feeling the mocking stares from all around the classroom directed at me. They prickled my skin, danced on it like laser sights. Once again, I imagined running far away from this place, fighting the clawing wind, soaring high above the pines in one long jump. With the wind in my back as my only companion. The eyes of my future classmates were asking, "This new boy, is he one of us? Or an outsider?" Somebody whispered something, and stifled laughter rolled through the classroom.
Доску вытри!
It was easy to guess who was the main prankster here.
Эй, очкарик! Ты чё, не только слепой, но еще и глухой? Доску вытри, говорю!
My knees weren't the only shaking part of my body anymore. I was trembling from head to toe, and I prayed for the teacher to come back sooner. My prayers were answered by the powers that be.
Ну что мне с тобой делать-то? Куда сажать, а? Давай-ка сядь, наверное, с Семеном. Он все равно один.
Еще чего?
The fatso put his backpack on the seat beside him in defiance, scratched his belly, and smirked.
Ты опять за старое? Снова бабушку в школу вызывать?
The classroom went silent.
А чё она мне сделает?
Не она, так я тебе сделаю. Рюкзак убрал быстро.
Semyon didn't move a muscle. He started studying the portraits of writers on the wall, looking bored. I needed to do something to resolve this somehow, to save myself.
Я...
I cleared my throat and continued in a stifled voice that sounded nothing like me.
Я могу за последнюю парту сесть. Там, кажется, свободно.
The teacher snorted loudly. She looked at me, then at Semyon, then back at me.
Ладно, садись пока туда. А с тобой, Бабурин, мы еще поговорим. Чтобы подошел после уроков. Будешь по классу дежурить, ясно?
Semyon forced out a twisted smile. Juicy pimples were growing on the tip of his nose, ripe for the taking. Ew. I mean, at least the teacher is saying something, but the question is, did she do that because he was being, in a roundabout way, mean to Anton, or was it just because he was disobeying? I walked carefully, afraid to stumble and fall, causing another outburst of laughter from everyone. I took my seat at the back, at the last table, where I was met with a pile of old posters. The outcasts took their seats, and the class was ready to start.
Вот и хорошо. Начнем урок. Тема: традиции русской и мировой литературы в рассказе Зощенко «Не надо врать».
The fatso turned back to me. His stare informed me of the coming days, weeks, and months of bullying. "I've got my eyes on you," said his watery look. After just a couple of periods, I had already noticed a huge yellow spit stain on my notebook. Then at the cafeteria, the Semyon accidentally spilled a glass of compote on me. Compote, a dessert drink brewed from a mix of dried fruit and berries. And then he flailed his hands around after exiting the toilet, so some of the liquid from his hands would get on me. Just before the final period for today, Semyon pushed me into a buzzing crowd of girls from our class. Of course. They made way, cursing, but I couldn't hold my balance and ended up ramming my face into the girl I took for the class rep before. Right in her chest. I immediately stepped back, dying from embarrassment.
Прости, ты в порядке?
Я...
Then she suddenly put her hands on her hips.
Нет, ну вы посмотрите на него. Облапал меня прямо у всех на глазах. Я сейчас все маме расскажу. Тебя из школы выгонят, извращенец.
There was some sort of sadistic pleasure in her eyes, as if she was a child who was about to put a lit-up match to the chafer beetle.
Я нечаянно, меня толкнули.
Все видели. Слепых среди нас нет.
Well, if you saw it, then you know it wasn't his fault, jeez. She stared at my glasses while showing me a creepy smile. I started to fume on the inside, but Semyon's laughter cooled my head.
Толкнули? Чё, правда?
He swaggered up to me, enveloping me in the smell of sunflower seeds and rotting teeth, and then pushed me to the ground.
Вот так, да? И чё ты сделаешь?
The bully towered over me, as if saying, "Come on, hit me. Let me see you try." Ooh. Oh no, fight back or endure. Oh, that's tricky. Because while I want Anton to stand up for himself, I kind of feel like he will get in trouble for it if he does. I mean, either way, I'm doing a quick save because, well. But, fight back. Fight back in what way? Like, punch him or just talk back? Stand up? Which one is it? I don't know about this, but I'll risk it.
Слушай, ты...
My throat went dry, my lips were moving on their own, and my voice was akin to a stifled squeal. Semyon wore a mocking smile.
Давай, давай, продолжай, очкарик. Чё примолк-то? Нам всем очень интересно. Если еще хоть раз меня тронешь...
Semyon slowly stuck out a finger and poked my forehead.
Натронул и чё? Еще хоть раз! Тронул! А вот еще! И еще! И еще! И еще!
He was poking me with his finger so hard that my head tilted backward. I must not cry, or I'll be done for.
Чё ты мне сделаешь, мямля?
My vision went blurry. My soles tore off from the floor. I rushed forward and threw a random punch without looking. What I saw when I opened my eyes was beautiful and horrifying at the same time. No pain, okay. Semyon was holding his ear and blinking in amazement. Was I the first person to rebel against his absolute rule?
Стопэ!
Лена!
I needed to run, but I was already surrounded by his cronies.
Лилия Павловна! Лилия Павловна! Петров Бабурина ударил!
Semyon's cheeks grew even redder and his pimples even whiter, like the heads of larvae. But a smile flashed on his face that was only noticed among his comrades. He got really close to me. The smell of rotten teeth washed over me.
Тебе! Пиздец!
His voice was evil and dangerous, like someone tore off the lid from a kettle with boiling fat. I was waiting to get hit, counting the thumbs of my heart and guessing where his fist will go. The solar plexus, the jaw, the nose. But he just turned around and walked off. A thought, cold and sober, and extremely rational, popped up in my head. I'm going to get killed today. I was late to leave the school after classes on purpose. Semyon didn't attend the last period, so I was hopeful. What if he decided to dodge the cleaning duty and ran home, forgetting all about me? I heaved a sigh of relief, like someone on death row whose execution was delayed by a day. But I didn't let myself forget his tone, his vengeful gaze, and his scary, electrified smirk. While the other students were leaving the school, laughing loudly, I was pretending to skim through my books near a window. I was staring outside, nervous. Semyon was nowhere to be found in the front yard or near the school gate. I didn't really believe I was this lucky, so I decided to be extra cautious and stayed for some more time in the corridor that was gradually getting less crowded. All of the bustle moved to the first floor. There was a skeleton peeking out of the biology classroom. Some jokester put a cap with the American condor on its head. The sound of running water were coming from the bathroom. I was the only person left in the whole school. I'm not alone, a sudden thought came to mind. I remembered the missing boy. His portrait was on the notice board near the schedule. I remembered his smile. Him looking at me. And the fact that he's most likely, already dead.
Привет.
I shuddered and turned around. At first, my eyes stumbled upon the black violin case. Then I noticed a girl from my class was holding it. She sat in the first row of the second column. I could swear I caught her looking at me a couple of times. And I was sneaking glances at her myself. Sometimes it just feels nice to look at something pretty. The spring, the sky, or a girl that's not in the crowd that laughs at Semyon's jokes. And she wasn't whispering the dirty laundry of other people to Katya. She spent all the breaks just like me, staying in the classroom or looking in the window or drawing something in her green notebook.
Здравствуй.
I turned red and pretended I was studying the pattern on the wooden floor.
Круто ты ему врезал.
Yeah, finally someone nice and someone who could appreciate it. I'm surprised we didn't get in trouble, but maybe that's still coming, so we'll see.
Это вышло случайно. Почти.
I started shoving books in my backpack to at least put something in my hands.
Вроде Семен раньше таким не был. Он к нам недавно перевелся. Бабушка мне его по секрету сказала, что он словно взбесился. Семена даже старшеклассники побаиваются. Представляешь? А ты вот молодец. Не струсил.
Угу.
I mumbled in reply. Yeah, right. Me? Brave? You were brave there for a second. Come on. A hero that has been standing around in the hallway to avoid a beating. The girl looked at me with her clear, attentive eyes.
А ты за рекой живешь? В том деревянном доме?
Ну да.
Там, наверное, страшно. Да еще через лес идти. Я бы так не смогла.
I shivered at the mention of the forest. I thought of intertwining branches, of a snake-like trail, of endless darkness that spread like mold among the crooked trees. So I straight up lied.
Да не так уж там и страшно. А что тебя так пугает?
She smiled after a brief pause. Pause? as if brushing off a daydream.
Да так, ничего. Меня, кстати, Полина зовут.
А меня Антон.
Ну, это я знаю.
It's still polite to introduce herself.
Слушай, Антон,
She stumbled, as if trying to decide whether she could continue.
а что ты делаешь после школы?
My chest felt prickly after her innocent question, yet somehow it felt pleasant.
Ничего такого.
I stumbled and didn't finish my sentence. Alyssa's predatory smile flashed in front of my eyes. Her playful eyes and the slits of the mask were probably just a product of my imagination, though. What if that fox girl is waiting for me after school? Or was it another of her weird jokes? I wonder if she's hiding a big red tail under her coat? I suddenly got covered with beads of sweat, like after a PE class. I wanted to take a shower, as if just thinking of the foxy girl made me dirty, soiled my clothes, lured me into the forest's embrace.
У меня сейчас занятие, скрипка, а потом я свободна. Дедушка мне репетитора нанял. Наш учитель музыки, он же скрипач. А здесь, в поселке, ему некому преподавать. Только мне.
She waved her free hand in the air, imitating the movement of a bow on violin strings. I could almost hear the music. It chased Alyssa out of my head. I looked at Paulina's lips, catching her every word, and was frozen from the unusual sensations. They were warm, soothing, and tingly. It felt like I was very small, and the feelings were immense, and they couldn't fit inside me.
Тут говорят, что у нас в поселке маньяк завелся. Раньше со школы меня всегда дедушка забирал, но в последнее время ему не здоровится.
I snuck a glance at Vova's photo. His eyeballs were studying me. His lips were wearing black lipstick. Just like the portrait on a gravestone.
Ты не подумай, я не трусишка, просто мне кажется, что с тобой будет безопаснее. Антон, ты сможешь проводить меня до дома?
There it was. Finally, everything that I read about in the adventure books, everything that I dreamed about, was seeping into my life. A mysterious crime, a beautiful stranger, and a heroic duel. A duel. Thinking of Simeon instantly sobered me up, returned me back to earth, and it started shaking under my feet like a deck of a ship. If only I could rise to the occasion in front of Paulina. Because no matter how brave I was trying to act, it was obvious for both of us that I wouldn't be able to stand a chance against a big guy like that. And him knocking me out won't even be the worst of it. The worst part is that Paulina will see all of that. And she'll laugh at me like everybody else. Don't think she will, buddy. No, I don't need anybody to see me in such a shameful state. I mean, better to have a witness, honestly. Especially if you're already scared he will do something extreme, so...
Сегодня вряд ли получится. Ты же знаешь, Семен, скорее всего, караулит на школьном дворе.
At least he's honest about it. I was worrying he was going to make up any excuse and like push her away.
Лучше мне с ним разобраться лично, по-мужски.
Глупости какие.
Agreed. Paulina brushed off some hair off her forehead, and I sensed a weak aroma of blackberry. Paulina was like water when you were thirsty. You gulp it down and still wanted more. I remembered the summer evenings at the country house, the fire's pungent smoke, the berries hanging over our fence from the neighbors, and a soft cover of pine needles under my soles. Those few peaceful days when I felt completely safe. My mom resting in the hammock, my dad putting meat on a skewer. Could have I foreseen the upcoming catastrophe in the crackle of the coals, in our parents' laughs, in the smell of the fleeting July? Could I have seen how fragile that world was?
Думаешь, этот дикарь будет честно драться? Со своими дружками набросятся всем скопом, опомниться даже не дадут.
Paulina suddenly flashed a devious smile.
Но если мы пойдем вместе, это их ошарашит. Я же не только первая скрипка на деревне, я ведь еще и девочка. Слышала от знакомого хулигана, что он никогда не нападает на кого-то в присутствии девушки.
But earlier, I mean, he didn't like punch us or anything, but I don't know about that.
Представляешь, у них кодекс чести такой.
A delinquent, you know, I thought, worried. Is he better than me? Taller? More handsome?
Ой, мне на музыку пора.
She made a couple of steps and stopped. Amazing. Paulina didn't look like those beauties from the magazine posters or the actresses from the movies. But in the flickering light of the ceiling lamps, she looked much more alluring.
А ты играешь на чем-нибудь?
My parents bought me a guitar a couple of years ago. I immediately remembered my meager attempts at making music. Same. Change. We're all waiting for change. Tsui's song echoed my thoughts and my desire to change something. Viktor Tsui, a singer and a frontman of a popular Soviet rock band Kino that played a mix of new wave and post-punk. Their hit song, Peremen, Changes, is one of the most popular rock tracks of the new Russian era. Died in a car accident. That guitar got lost somewhere, as if refusing to move to the old house near the forest. I think my parents gave it away to someone that needed it more.
Увы, не играю.
Жалко. Ну ладно, я побежала. Пока!
I mean, I doubt his parents have enough money for, like, music lessons right now. If they're actually doing as bad as is implied so far. Her shout was captured by the loud echo. Her shoes also echoed through the school hallways.
Пока!
I wasn't sure if Paulina heard me. I looked out the window again. The schoolyard was empty, just a couple of grade schoolers throwing snowballs at each other. Nobody who looked like the hulking Semyon with his cronies. This was giving me hope. What should I do? Paulina could become my friend, the first one in this new place. And besides, she may be in real danger of meeting a killer, and I'll be her defender, a knight. And even though my inner voice was hesitant and whispered about running, away from the killers lurking in the woods at night, Paulina was worth the risk. But the red cunning fox was also intriguing. She promised me to help look for Vova, and this will bring me a reward. More money will almost guarantee peace in my family. Nah, I don't think so. Gifts for Olya. I imagined my sister, happy like those girls who get prizes from Suponev in the finest hour. Sergei Suponev, a Soviet and Russian TV host, the most prolific showman of the Russian kids' TV in the 90s. He hosted teen quizzes as well as computer entertainment shows. Suponev died on December 8, 2001, when he crashed a snowmobile into a river pier. Okay. She'll be dancing with the famous singers, maybe a new popular boys band like Ivanushki International. I'm so sorry, I'm getting a phone call. Not sure if you can hear the sound, hopefully not. So we'll just continue on. She'll be dancing with the famous singers, maybe a new popular boy band like Ivanushki International. Ivanushki International, a Russian boy band that was popular in the 90s and early 2000s and consisted of 3 singers. Its songwriter and vocalist Igor Sodin died to a fall from the 6th-story balcony. The official police report claimed it to be a suicide. Oleg Yakovlev substituted him in the band and later died from cirrhosis. Of course you have to tell us all the ways they died, eh? That's something we need to know here. Mom and Dad hugging in the Ostankino pavilion. And then all of us going to Disneyland. Do we have more to look at? Okay. Before making a choice here. Turn me around and I'll tell you who's stupid. I bet something offensive is written on the other side. I wonder how long would Semyon keep turning it around if it fell into his hands. An abandoned zinc bucket with a rag on the bottom of it, filled to the brim with murky tap water. It reeked of salty chemicals, and the stench was so intense that I felt sick. I staggered away from it, praying that I don't meet the same fate as the person on cleaning duty. Okay, the bag. Somebody left their school shoes on the windowsill. Judging from their size, they belonged to a boy my age. Okay, so there's a choice going with Alyssa. Oh, I like how they did that here with a picture in the window. Or Paulina. Well? I'm thinking Paulina. Snow danced in the air outside the window, following the rhythm of the music that was flowing from around the corner. I jumped off the windowsill and started walking along the hallway, curiosity eating away at me. The half an hour I'd spent waiting crawled at snail's pace. I wanted to see Paulina again. The music became louder. It streamed out of the half-open door at the far end of the corridor. My music taste was limited to Letov, Shevchuk, the timeless classics, and pop songs I saw on TV. Igor Letov, a singer and a frontman of the band Grazdanskaya Oborona, Civil Defense, that played a mix of garage punk and psychedelic rock. Letov is posthumously considered the godfather and the patriarch of Russian punk rock and of the most influential members of the punk movement in Russia. Died peacefully in his sleep. Along with music videos that would sometimes be put on tapes as teasers before a movie. but this violin melody captivated me. It felt like a master woodcutter working with delicate wood, a fragile crystal toy, a gust of warm wind. I pressed my cheek against the doorway. Paulina was hiding from me in the far end of the classroom, but a shadow that fell on the wall definitely belonged to a girl with a violin. The movements of her bow were so graceful that I felt like I was getting carried away on the waves of music. My heart broke the barrier of my ribcage and started hopping around. Faster and faster, it jumped on snow piles, gliding between the pines toward the fiery sun above the windfall.
Заскучал?
I was so deep in thought that I didn't hear the approaching footsteps. After bathing in music, Paulina felt even more magical.
Да нет. Я о комиксе своем думал.
Oh, come on, you can be honest. For some unknown reason, I lied.
Ты комиксы рисуешь?
Да, то есть... Планирую рисовать.
Ага. И про что твой комикс?
About the most charming and kind girl that plays a violin who somehow happened to be in this house of horror.
Про лису. Ой, точнее, про говорящих животных, что живут в лесу и помогают заблудившимся детям вернуться домой. А потом они пляшут в ночи.
Ого! Как интересно! Сам придумал?
I lowered my gaze.
Вдохновился, глядя в окно.
Nightly vows. Okay. We descended to the first floor. I opened the door in front of Paulina. Dad told me how essential it is to be a gentleman.
Значит, творческая личность. Я догадывалась, что ты не такой, как все. Особенный.
Шутишь? Я самый обыкновенный.
Это Семен обыкновенный. В смысле, обычный придурок. А в тебе живет нечто доброе и пушистое.
Yes, that is much more important. Something barked near my leg when we were crossing the schoolyard, interrupting Paulina.
Не бойся, это Жулька.
I stood on one knee and rubbed the barking dog behind the ear. It was frantically wagging its tail, like it was some sort of propeller. I looked around the yard, trying to find Alyssa. But the fox girl was nowhere to be found, neither in the yard nor on the road.
Брось ее! Ты что, она же дикая! Клещей еще подцепишь.
Нет, у нее хозяйка есть. Вроде.
Paulina looked at the playful dog with disgust, covering her mouth with a handkerchief.
А у тебя никакой еды не завалялось?
Кажется, что-то осталось. Покормим и пойдем, ладно?
She took out a sandwich out her bag, threw it to Julka. The little dog rushed to her banquet, swept away the bread with her nose and started eating the bologna.
Какая привереда! Ешь все, давай!
Paulina tugged my sleeve, egging me on.
Ты чего?
She replied with laughter. The violin girl had literally dragged me out of the school gate, stifling laughs into a fist. I turned around. Julka followed us with sad eyes as we were leaving. The dog looked especially lonely with the school as the backdrop. And then Paulina stopped laughing She walked alongside me with a blank stare, completely silent.
Нечего паразитов плодить.
Bit of a snub, are we? Her remark turned out pretty harsh. Was it really the stray's fault she had to live in the street?
Они потом на людей кидаются. Прошлой зимой такая стая чуть дедушку не загрызла.
Какой кошмар.
Его парализовало.
Okay, then it's understandable that she's... Yeah, okay.
Он больше никогда не сможет ходить.
I remember the scary pack of dogs that was chasing me just a while ago.
Мне очень жаль.
Ничего.
Paulina showed me another enchanting smile, her eyes half closed.
Главное, что мы друг друга поняли.
I forgot all about Julka after she said that. Some third graders were throwing snowballs at each other and singing.
Раз, два, прилети сова.
The owl. Olya. An image of my sister sitting near the window, bored, looking for me in the twilight, flashed before my eyes. I promised myself that I will go home as soon as I escort Paulina.
А что это за песенку малые поют? Уже второй раз за день ее слышу.
We were walking down the main street. Somewhere near, a tractor was grumbling, cleaning snowdrifts. Ravens flew across the ashen sky. A flock of black birds circled above us, like scary crosses that ran away from graves.
Про сову? Это считалочка местная. Мне ее в детстве дедушка напевал. Он интересуется историей края, много знает про наш фольклор.
И что там за считалочка такая?
Слушай.
She started walking backwards, facing me and smiling.
Раз, два, прилети сова. 3, 4, 5, время поиграть. 6, да 6, дыбом волчья шерсть. 7, 8, бьем копытом озимь. Для медведя, для лисы зайчик кушать принеси.
I thought that I'd already met a fox this morning. Thankfully, I hadn't met any wolves or bears. As I was looking at the girl by my side, I became strangely brave, so I said something unexpected.
У тебя красивый голос.
Paulina adjusted her hair, slightly embarrassed.
Спасибо.
И что же, это конец считалочки? Принес им заяц покушать или нет?
Поди узнай. Спросить не у кого. Считалочка очень старая. Древняя даже. С ней легенда одна связана. Если тебе интересно.
Конечно.
Тут в тайге раньше племена жили разные. Дедушка говорит, у них была такая инсценяция. Короче, такой ритуал, когда мальчику наступала пора становиться мужчиной.
I listened closely. I mean, I was also really close to that age myself.
Юношу отводили в лес, и он должен был 3 ночи провести там, охотясь. По легенде, один такой юноша ушел в тайгу и пропал. А вернулся, когда его перестали искать. Нагрянул в деревню, исцарапанный, грязный, замерзший.
I imagined sleeping among the pines and bare layers.
Родные выбежали к нему, а он упал на землю. Привели шамана. Тот осмотрел молодого охотника и помрачнел. Сказал, плохи дела. До утра юноша бился в судорогах и повторял эту считалочку. Снова и снова. Раз, два, прилети, сова, будто ему в тайге нашептали. А к рассвету он умер. Только вот шаман сказал, что он и так был мертв, что он мертвым из лесу пришел и мертвыми губами шептал считалочку.
I froze in fear.
Это точно не ужастик.
Фольклор бывает пострашнее всякого кино, уж поверь. Дедушка говорит, что племя то собралось спешно и ушло на юг.
Они были смелыми, если жили здесь.
Polina kicked one of the snow piles with a small boot.
Смелыми и глупыми. Неужели надо мертвецу явиться из лесу, чтобы до людей дошло?
Дошло что?
Что нужно уезжать отсюда. Есть целый мир. А есть наш поселок. Мир.
She spread her arms wide.
Поселок.
She showed a distance that was almost invisible with her 2 fingers.
Я часто представляю большие города. Могу часами рассматривать глобус. Или журналы «Вокруг света» из библиотеки. Какие же там прекрасные названия. Только послушай. Рейкьявик, Тель-Авив. Это же чистейшая музыка, а не слова.
She started circling, her eyes shut dreamingly. The forest towered before us, touching the low clouds. The road fell into the semi-dark between the trees.
Я бы могла покорить сцену. Выступать перед тысячами зрителей.
А я сцены ужасно боюсь.
Так ты другим возьмешь, живописью. У нас-то есть будущее. А что ждет того же Семена? Ну, станет он еще толще. Ну,
Будет пирожками торговать.
ага. С собачатиной.
We burst out laughing, exorcising worry from our minds with light-hearted fun.
Если ему, конечно, доверят пирожки.
Наверное, ты права. Он их в один присест слопает.
Я так и думала, что вдвоем в лесу не страшно.
I looked around. The snow was sparkling, reflecting the last rays of the setting sun. My pulse fastened from the thought that we were alone.
Да, ты была права.
Alone, you say? Suddenly, I heard nearby bushes rustle, spilling snow in the ravine. A giant man walked from them, fastening a zipper on his pants. I recognized him. He was in the schoolyard this morning. He gave us an indifferent look and just walked away. Thank goodness. I was worried that I did something bad by clicking on him.
Ну и тип. Хорошо, что ты со мной, Антон. Кто знает, что бы сделал этот бандит, если бы я была одна.
She gave me a look full of admiration, and when the big man had almost disappeared behind the trees, she stuck out her tongue at him and laughed. Such a little rascal. Polina rushed through the firebreak.
Не отставай!
Никогда в жизни!
Ты знаешь, ты так изъясняешься, как персонаж из приключенческой книжки.
Was she complimenting or mocking me? I didn't want to look for the hidden meaning. Not when we're on such a wonderful walk.
Ну да, я люблю книги.
Ого, читающий мужчина! Звучит интригующе.
A man? Really? I got embarrassed and my cheeks turned beet red, but I still thanked fate for being able to wander around the forest with Polina like this. The girl suddenly stopped and stared silently into the darkening thicket, as if waiting for something. I felt uneasy all of a sudden. And then she asked me in a cold voice.
Ты был там?
Где? В чаще?
Polina burst out laughing again, shattering my anxious thoughts.
Да нет! В большом мире! В городах с музыкальными названиями!
А разве Москва музыкальное название? Больше похоже на кваканье лягушки.
To me, it sounds like the croaking of a frog.
Ты был в Москве?
Ну да, в детстве.
Polina's eyes started sparkling.
И какая она?
Ну, красивая, шумная, неоновая.
Неоновая.
It felt like she was savoring those words.
А на Красной площади был?
Конечно. Она такая выпуклая. И в ЦУМе был, и на ВДНХ.
Okay. ZUM, Central Universal Department Store, one of the biggest department stores in Europe, situated in downtown Moscow. It was founded in 1885 as Mir and Mirilis Co. After the Soviet Revolution, the store was rationalized and given its contemporary name in 1933. VDNKH, Exhibition of Achievements of National Economy. The second biggest exhibition complex in Moscow. It's present in the top 50 biggest European exhibition centers list. 49 architectural pieces in the complex's territory are considered cultural heritage monuments.
Мне больше всего метро понравилось. Там так пахнет.
Как?
She ran up to me, grabbed me by the sleeve, and stared in my eyes with clear interest.
Не могу описать.
А нарисовать?
Что, запах?
Великие музыканты могут сыграть запах.
Не может быть.
Я дам тебе кассеты.
She started twirling in the falling snow again.
Я обязательно побываю в Москве. А главное, в Вене. Вена — моя мечта. Это же столица музыки. Моцарт, Бетховен, Штраус, филармонический оркестр, государственная опера. Я буду выступать, а ты рисовать.
Her enthusiasm spread to me. I wanted to do something, right this moment.
А ты куда хочешь попасть?
I sighed and confessed.
В Диснейленд.
I remembered the Finest Hour show again. Olya preferred Call of the Jungle, but I always spent my Mondays in front of the TV. Colorful tables with numbers on signs, and a charming Mr. Suponev at the wheel. And the prizes! Chocolate eggs, video equipment, and the most exciting one, a trip to Disneyland for the winner. My parents promised to take me there, to the land of the mouse, and I believed them at first. Well, maybe they also believed it back then. Now they just reply with silence every time I ask about it, and it saddens me to no end. I have just 3 words on my mind in those moments. But you promised. Polina had seemingly read my mind.
Добраться туда проще, чем нам кажется. Каждый лепит свою судьбу, как хочет.
She picked up 2 handfuls of snow, and then, as if she forgot about everything, showed me a sly smile.
А давай снеговика лепить.
Давай.
When I get back home, I'll make a snowman for Olya too. She'll be so happy. But for now, We were almost done with the first ball, rolling it shoulder to shoulder. Paulina was laughing. Locks of her hair fell on her lively face. She was so cute when she blew them away.
Чего у тебя такой маленький шар, Антон? Максимум голова снеговичка. Больше надо. Не ленись.
I couldn't remember the last time I had so much fun. Paulina swept her now crimson lips.
Ты мечтал когда-нибудь очутиться на другой планете?
Something flashed in her eyes when she said that. I couldn't really put my finger on what it was.
И даже в другой вселенной.
Paulina sighed in what felt like relief.
Тогда ты понимаешь меня.
Our palms glided across the ball of snow, straightening up any bumps it had. An almost ideal white ball rose up in the middle of the clearing. Then another one popped up. We lifted it up from two sides and placed on the one that served as a foundation. Finally, Paulina helped the third ball to get on top of the other two.
Ставить голову на место – мой конек. У тебя морковка случайно не завалялась?
Увы.
There was no fear, no worry at this clearing. I became more daring, ran toward the thicket to crack a couple of branches. I pulled at the intertwining windfall, but Paulina's voice suddenly awakened me from my delusion.
Антон, там кто-то есть.
I turned around, puzzled. Paulina was looking at me. No, at something behind my back. She stared at it, her brows furrowed. Not a single trace was left of the cheerful atmosphere we had a moment ago.
Полин,
She slowly raised her hand and pointed at the darkness that was approaching the trees in the distance.
Впереди кто-то стоит. Темная сгорбленная фигура, видишь? И ручищами сосну гладит.
I turned around, directing my eyes where she was pointing to. The area around the dry raspberry bushes was empty.
там никого нет.
Оно спряталось. За деревом.
The collar of my coat felt suffocating. I pulled on it instinctively. I felt a spasm in my stomach. I smiled weakly and asked, hoping for a good answer.
Это что, шутка?
Paulina seemingly lost all her words. She just continued staring deep into the endless forest. Bravery check, I thought, so I stepped toward the glossy black trunk, Paulina's gaze pushing me in the back. I was trying to muster all my courage, but my inner voice was telling me to stop, to curl into a ball, to play dead even. Anything but go there, into the writhing darkness. The twilight was sucking me in, limiting my vision. The clearing was a deep well, its walls prohibiting the sunlight from reaching its bottom. I heard the air ring, or was it ringing in my ears? One step. 2 steps. I bit my lip to stop myself from screaming if anything happened. There was nobody behind the pine. I sighed and turned back to Paulina.
Полина, здесь никого. Ну, здорово, Антошка!
From the darkness behind the pines, just like cavemen from their cave, appeared smirking Semyon with a bunch of his cronies.
Опачки, какая встреча!
Очкарик в жопе шарик на.
Polina let out a shriek when the bastards shoved her away from me. They surrounded me like a carnivorous pride, making me step back. Simeon's heavy leg blasted through the snowman's belly. The balls we rolled crumbled, became a mushy mess, with just a single broken branch poking out. Paulina gasped angrily. I also felt the touch of scalding hatred. The smell of sweat and tobacco attacked my nostrils. The inside of my mouth felt salty, as if I'd licked a battery.
Полин, не бойся.
I shuddered after hearing my own voice. It sounded unnatural, rough and scary.
Полинка-то чё бояться? Лучше за себя беспокойся.
The fatso spit through the gap in his teeth and pushed me so hard that I hit my back against a tree.
Ну как? Страшно, мудила.
I heard Paulina's angry voice from behind.
Не трогайте его!
It would have been better if Paulina wasn't around. I wish she wouldn't see me in such a shameful position. I think we already established that she doesn't really care about that.
Глядите-ка, пацаны! Девчонка за него заступается!
Ага, циклона!
Ты, сука приезжая, не на того руку поднял.
Semyon was moving toward me, readying his fist. In that moment, the other delinquent in track pants made a loud whistle, and the hulking boy lowered his hand. It was unexpected. Seems like Baburin wasn't the leader of his gang. In reality, they were all listening to the boy who was looking like a small carnivore with very strong and sharp teeth. They decided against hitting me. They probably wanted to humiliate me in front of the girl first. Damn it.
Слышь, Гондон Батькович! А это кто? Еще одна подружка?
Да у тебя тут гарем, на!
Jealous? Only then I noticed Julka behind my legs, trembling from the cold, snow plastered all over its fur. It probably ran all the way from the schoolyard, searching for our smell. The delinquent squatted in front of the dog and beckoned it with his hand.
Ой ты, батюшки! Ко мне, сучка блохастая!
The others let out nasty laughs. The dog's ears perked up, and she started carefully moving closer.
Иди сюда! Иди, дам кое-чего!
Don't you hurt the dog? Oh god. The dog didn't even have a chance to sniff him when this animal abuser caught it by the ear and kicked it right under the tail so hard it flew into the nearest snow pile, squealing. The whole gang burst out laughing, and my heart got encrusted in ice. Even the birds that were perched up on tree branches let out frightening caws. Then I noticed something strange. Paulina could hardly keep herself from smiling. Does she really hate dogs so much that what the skinny guy did amused her? After locking eyes with me, she changed her jubilant smirk to a thoughtful grimace. Why isn't she running away? I thought in horror. At the edge of my vision, I saw something flash in the illusory twilight of the sleeping forest. Or were that just bushes moving their icy branches in the wind?
Ромка, она ж больше срать не сможет. Давай теперь я. Второй раз ебану минус на минус даст плюс.
But the stray was already nowhere to be seen.
Чего ты, баран? Втолкуй его на очкарику, где его место. Только так, чтобы он понял.
Ага, за ним кофякна. Этот очкарик тебе при всем классе всек.
Да без Б.
Simeon brought a sizable signet ring with some geometric shape carved in it up to my face.
Ща, парашник, я тебе этой печаткой так заряжу. Клеймо на всю жизнь останется.
Where did all of my inner strength and bravery go?
Стой!
Stop, a wheezy whisper left my lips, and my head tilted forward, hitting Simeon's fist. Red sparks flew from my eyes. They're going to gang up on me and beat me up.
Рома! Пусть они прекратят!
Прости, но пацанам надо по-мужски побазарить. А тебе в сторонке постоять.
Бяша, подсоби.
Simeon gave me a rough push toward the bastard with the slanting eyes, and he tripped me. I fell in the sharp crust of ice, and the fatso stepped on my hand, preventing me from getting up. A painful groan escaped my throat.
Слыхали, как заныл? А ты случаем не педик?
I started to lose breath from anger and resentment. The pain was growing. My ear was hot and pulsating pain was shooting through it, like it was cut off and a ball of nettle was soon in its place.
Чё молчишь, Антошка? Отвечай, ты педик?
At this moment, I felt pure, unbridled rage, the emulgation of my anger. Like the sprout sink, it rose up from the depths of my mind, filling all my thoughts.
Твари! Знаете, что мой отец...
Кто-то педик!
Simeon burst out laughing. This became the last straw. Fear and anger were grappling inside me like mad dogs.
Он айкидо занимался, поняли? Он еще воевал. Таких, как вы, с закрытыми глазами убивает. Я только слово скажу, он...
Romka lifted up his arm, stopping my torrent of lies, and made a couple of steps forward. Simeon slowly backed off, giving me an opportunity to stand up. Pines were swaying back and forth like solemn guardians. Did he believe me? Or was he confused by my face, twisted with rage?
Воевал, говоришь? Мой батя тоже воевал. В Афгане. А твой?
И мой.
Да, и в каких войсках, интересно?
I stumbled. Fear jumped at my rage's throat and made it bleed.
Да он фуфло гонит, Ромка! Бля, будуна!
Думал, меня так просто развести? Я тебя, сучонка, насквозь вижу.
There was a nasty smile on his face now. This didn't bode well for me.
Ты сам себе приговор подписал.
В школе тебя училка спасла, ну а теперь все. Хана тебе.
Во-во! Давай, Антошка, молись, чтобы твой труп по весне нашли б.
Сидел бы ниже травы, был бы целочкой. Жирного стукнул, одно дело. Сёма, ушатай-ка его.
The delinquents closed in on me again, and I ended up in front of Semyon. Blood was pumping in my temples.
Ну, Ромочка, ну хватит! Ты уже все доказал! Дай нам уйти!
Ты иди. А мы пока мусор приберем.
What bugged me at that moment wasn't even the humiliating attitude from Romka, but rather how sweet Polina had addressed him. The delinquents were pushing the girl toward the pines. But I'm wondering, is he your brother, maybe? Something like that? I mean, at least at one point I was wondering if maybe she actually was on their side and just tricked Anton, so at least that doesn't seem to be it. Branches were swaying back and forth as if whispering something, giving me hope. I gritted my teeth, fighting the thought that I looked silly, and took a boxing stance I often saw in the movies.
Хера ты, Майк Тайсон!
This was my first ever fight. I'll remember it for the rest of my life. If I don't kick the bucket, of course. At the edge of my vision, I noticed the darkness writhe again, as if someone was walking back and forth there. I sensed Roma's claws grab my backpack.
Манатки, Антошка. Махаться мешает.
I was about to refuse, unwilling to cooperate with the bastard, but then he fished a butterfly knife out of his pocket with one smooth motion, spun it as if showing off, and put the blade to my neck.
Слышь, Фрей, расслабься, а то больно будет.
I let out a cloud of steam instead of words. Romka pulled with all his might, and my backpack ended up in his hands. Polina shrieked. Romka winked at her, as if saying, "Don't worry, I've got this." Calm and relaxed. An insidious smile on his face, he looked into my backpack.
Ты от нас что-то скрываешь, да? У меня в школе какая-то крыса сменку подрезала. Опачки!
Romka gave me a dubious smile.
Так, а что это у нас здесь?
My texts and notebooks fell in the snow. He was holding my backpack in one hand and something weird in the other. It looked like... a mask. Roma lifted it high, as if showing to someone else, to someone in the treetops and the twilight among the trees. An old bunny mask. Long, worn-out ears, barely visible nose and whiskers, mangy fur on the sides. Where did it come from? Who put it there? Semyon laughed.
Новый год уже прошел, мудила. Или ты реально поехавший?
Это не мое!
Да как не твое, В твоем портфеле лежала она!
Romka was watching the scene unfold with an evil smile on his face.
Дикари! Масок раньше не видели!
Таких конченых не видели. А знаешь что? Надевай.
Зачем?
Надевай, говорю. Попрыгаешь перед нами, зайчик.
Давай, давай! Или без штанов домой пойдешь на?
Not when Paulina is here.
Не надену.
Сёма, надень-ка на него.
Biasha rushed to his friend's side and took the worn-out mask from him with a buffoonish bow. Then he passed it to Semyon, who was already rubbing his hands in anticipation. I looked around the pine woods, as if waiting for help, as if the shadows that writhed around us would take pity on me and take my side. Branches looked like arms, twisted in unusual angles. Blackened bark was their charred skin, and the darkness was the smoke they produced. I can't run, won't get away. They'll catch me. And then? No, I won't run, won't abandon Paulina.
Только учти, Сёма, если он скакать не станет, ты сам за него поскачешь.
Этот чмошник и не станет? Да погляди на него, он же дурик конченый.
Этот дурик тебе уже раз в жбан зарядил.
Ромка прав! Давай, толстый, восстанавливай авторитетно!
Или сам у нас запрыгаешь так, что тетяндра отцепится.
Remember what Paulina said about him changing? Obviously these guys are also pushing him around, which doesn't make it right, of course. Bullying behaviors always shitty, no matter the reason or whatever. But yeah. He must indeed be scared of Romka. Semyon swore silently and glared first at me, then at Paulina.
Вот. Это чтобы маска хорошо налезла.
He held a huge ball of spit on the inside of the plastic bunny face and put it close to mine. His spit looked like a squashed spider. Romka's face twisted. He spasmed like a beast, like he wanted to tell Semyon something, but then he suddenly stopped. Paulina covered her face with her hands in terror. Semyon was still close by, with a disgusting smirk on his face and a terrible smell coming from his mouth.
Надевай, быра! А ту урою!
The mask almost looked even more disgusting now, yet, despite everything, I felt like it was a chance for salvation. It could become my second skin. If only I was to put it on, if only my face was to touch its bunny surface, I'm sure the fur will glitter, the ears will tremble like they're alive. I just need to put it on, and Semyon and his friends will be gone. Well, I also wondered if maybe putting on the bunny mask would be good, but then he spit in it, so now I'm doubting that. Forever. Oh. Shall we tell him to fuck off or put the mask on? Again, quite hard, because I do want him to stand up for himself. Honestly, yeah, I think if he didn't spit in the mask, I would have put it on. And I'm wondering now if punching him before made that, or yeah, I mean, it's my first time playing this game, so I really have no idea how much the choices influence the course of the story, or if it's only for the end. Thing is, putting on the mask doesn't guarantee that we'll get off lightly here, you know? So also I'm wondering if putting on the mask will get us more into, yeah, like towards the forest beasts or something. I don't know. Oh, that's tough. But like, if we didn't see anything in the forest, if we didn't think there was anything else going on here than just stupid, awful bullies, then surely this is the right choice, yeah? I mean, right. What is right? No. For some reason, Romka's disappointment with Semyon made me feel brave. Something was wrong in their crew, some old disagreement. I should cut this old wound open.
Знаешь что, Семен?
My own voice, smooth and determined, was a huge surprise. I stepped forward and calmly proclaimed,
Иди нахуй.
It felt like the whole world was paused for a second, and then unpaused right away. Semyon's pupils widened. The mask fell out of his meaty hands. He took a while to process my words, looking stunned, as if he was trying to solve a difficult math problem, but the answer he got made him mad, judging by the bulging veins on his forehead. The others just observed the scene silently, waiting for the inevitable payback. I noticed Polina's face stretch in horror.
Ты труп!
Semyon lunged at me like a hawk and clawed at my face with his twisted fingers with gnawed fingernails. I threw a kick toward the layer of fat under the coat.
Да! Всыпь ему!
At the same moment, the world became fuzzy. The black trees and the faces of my classmates were all blurred.
Мои очки!
Что, ничего не видишь без очков, мудила?
He threw up his hand that was holding my glasses toward the sky, so I couldn't get to them.
Отдай! Сейчас же
I was interrupted by a leaden fist with a sharp signet that hit me in the brow, producing a cracking sound, throwing me to the frozen earth. A circle of blurry faces, dying from disgusting laughter, was mocking me, making me want to puke. And as soon as I was almost able to catch my breath, a blurry figure rushed toward me. But instead of a new hit, I was offered an outreached hand. I immediately grabbed it, hoping it was Polina, but I soon realized how wrong I was after I felt the sting of dry blisters on the palm. It was Romka. He helped me stand up.
Правда ничего не видишь?
His voice sounded compassionate, which surprised me. I squinted, trying to find Polina in the fog before my eyes. She was gathering my things and putting them back in my school bag.
А слышишь, хорошо?
А?
He leaned in close and asked with a voice that was way less friendly.
Слышишь ты хорошо, Антошка?
Да.
I blinked in bewilderment.
Ну так слушай внимательно.
He brushed off my coat, and then hit me in the jaw with all his might. My jaw clicked. If my tongue was between my teeth at that moment, I would not only be blind, but I would also talk worse than Birscha. I staggered, the world around me spun like a pack top again. Romka held me by the elbow, preventing me from falling over. Birscha locked her in his arms, preventing her from running to my side.
Это тебе аванс. Еще раз увижу тебя с Полинкой, хотя бы в метре от нее пеняй на себя. Ты понял, а?
Да.
Чисто
His fist landed on my temple. The world turned upside down. It felt like I was falling into the sky, the color of decaying meat. I grabbed the roots to stop myself from tumbling more. My consciousness was drifting on top of the abyss, gliding to its depths like a deflated balloon. I tried to get up.
Отпусти! Да убери же ты руки!
A blurry silhouette that probably belonged to Polina was fighting back, but two others held her by the hands and dragged her away.
Мы домой тебя проводим, не бойся.
Мало ли, какие психи по лесу шастают.
А Тоша пускай отдохнет.
Полина!
Romka's boot met with my face. My hand got twisted, the back of my head hit the ice. My eyes obediently rolled over. The darkness jumped out, took a stance, just to devour me. Tough luck. What do you mean, tough luck? Simeon slowly backed off, giving me an opportunity to stand up. I turned around, dug my nose into the bed sheets, forced my eyes open with great difficulty. Painting on the walls, books, a pile of comic magazines. I felt up my chin, afraid that it will respond with sharp pain. My fingers slid across my face to my temples. No bumps, no pain. I sat up, blinking in surprise, fixed my glasses, studied my hands, clean, without any mud under the nails. My school bag was reclined against the table. I heard bits and pieces of a conversation through the door. I was at home, in my bedroom. Did I get here myself? And what about the glasses? Did Semyon return them? Polina, maybe? Or an unknown friend? I decided to leave that question for later and looked out the window. The forest had many secrets, and it wasn't in any hurry to reveal them to me. The clock on the nightstand showed 10 a.m. The sun was already above the field, but it didn't bring any warmth. The thicket moaned from its cracking bones. What the heck? What was that cut? I almost thought we met a bad end here. I went out into the hallway and the conversation became clearer. Laughter. I haven't heard Mom laugh in so long. In a silent house among the sneaking shadows. Such an ordinary but dear laughter. I sneaked through the ladder to the lower floor, as if afraid to spoil that moment.
А я ему говорю, комиксы есть? Зайцу своему купить хочу. А он, ваш заяц комиксы читает?
Mom burst out laughing. Olya followed suit.
Ну да, говорю, заяц у меня цирковой.
Боже, ты лучший.
А ты сомневалась.
Ни на секундочку.
Жених и невеста!
When I entered the kitchen, Mom was kissing Dad on the forehead and he was gently stroking her shoulder. Olya sat between our parents, armed with a fork. A polka-dotted cooking pot emanated a pleasant aroma, even the lid was on.
А вот и он.
Привет, Соня! Весь в отца.
The white canvas of a frosted window behind Mom's back made it look like she was on someone's painting.
Садись, садись, в ногах правды нет. А завтрак – самое важное для здорового человека.
I sat down, a charming smile on my lips. Olya winked at me, and the lamp on the table flickered in unison with her.
Заспанный какой.
Какой есть! Наш родной! В детдом сдавать поздно!
Dad let out a dry laugh to show he was joking. Mom slapped him on the shoulder.
Ой, я голодная, страшно.
А мы, думаешь, просто так тут слюной капаем?
Братик, ты так кушать будешь?
Как?
I caught the sparkling gazes of my parents on myself. If I had a camera at that moment, I would have taken a snap so I could always look at those smiles on a photograph. I wanted this beautiful moment to last forever. The light bulb went out and then came back. The window glass shuddered slightly.
Сними маску, сынок. Есть же неудобно.
Какую маску?
A silly smile got stuck on my face. Dad showed me his sturdy white teeth that looked like piano keys.
Снимай, снимай, заяц.
I slid my hand across my cheek, let out a laugh.
Вы о чем?
The whole family was laughing now, pointing their fingers at me and slapping their knees and the tablecloth. Dad wiped his wet eyes with his knuckles.
Ух, насмешил ты нас! Ну, молодец! А теперь маску сними, будь добр.
I touched my face again. My skin went numb.
Но на мне нет маски.
Mom fidgeted on her chair. She tilted her head and squinted. The canvas behind her back turned grey and kept getting darker with every passing moment.
Но я не могу уже терпеть.
Сними маску, не валяй дурака.
His voice was kind but firm.
Мам, Тоша меня пугает.
Chair legs scraped against the floorboards. Olya moved away from me. She wasn't smiling anymore. Actually, there wasn't a single smile left in the room, if you don't count the cracks on the walls.
Что ты наделал? Твоя сестра плачет!
Но...
Olya sobbed, her eyes downcast, sneaking fearful glances at me. Mom slammed her fist on the table, and I almost fell to the floor along with the chair.
Сын называется. Мы веселились, а тут ты пришел. Испортил все.
Splashes of saliva flew at me. I turned to Dad, begging him to explain what was going on. Sticky syrup trickled down Dad's beard, falling on his shirt. His eyes were looking in different directions. There was a loud sound in the attic. Water pipes grumbled. The house was alive. Every room had someone rustling, moving around, breathing it in, breathing in it. The light bulb started flickering like a stroboscope. The faces of my parents disappeared into the darkness, only to appear again moments later. Outside, a tall shadow walked past the window. I was about to jump up and run away, but my body wasn't listening to my commands. My hands just obediently stayed on the table. I was just an onlooker. The lights went out. I spent 3 heartbeats in complete darkness. Then the bulb flashed with blinding light. 3 masks were looking at me with their gaping eyes. A foxwoman where my mom was just a moment ago. A wolfman at the head of the table. And a bunny girl, my Ola. I couldn't even ask why they put on these strange and scary animal faces, and why the fur on them was moving, as if there's something writhing inside the masks, making the papier-mâché bulge. My tongue didn't listen to the commands my brain sent to it. I could only shift my gaze between the masks, watching the long, twisted shadows behind the backs of my family.
Кушать подано!
She tore off the lid from the pot. The cut off head was lying in the bloody gravy. A pair of glazed eyes was drilling me from inside the pot. Its mouth was open in a silent scream. The head at the bottom of the pot belonged to me. Blood ran down the agonized face of the cut-off head. At the same time, something hot started streaming from my nostrils, scarlet drops falling on the tablecloth.
Ешь!
I screamed. I jumped up. My jaw was burning, as were my temples. The kitchen, the beasts and animal masks, and the dead head. Everything had disappeared. Everything but the goddamn mask that was haunting me. One of the delinquents put it on me for the laughs. I tore off the bunny face that had already stuck to my face, threw it into the darkness, and realized that I woke up near the crumbled snowman in the forest. Covered in snow and coniferous needles, without my glasses and with a smashed face. So I blacked out. Horrible. Pulsating pain seemed like a gift compared to the horrors I just witnessed. I stood up, spitting out blood. The forest seemed like a prison that was keeping me in with its wooden bars. I didn't know how long I was out. My limbs were numb from the cold. My pants were soaking wet. I stood alone in a ring of towering trunks, not being able to see anything. Everything around me moved, trembled. My ears went numb from all the rustling. The treetops melted into the darkness of the cosmos. The bushes became empty cells whose occupants were suddenly set free. It felt like a clawed fang could fly out of the darkness into my stunned face at any moment. I heard a scream somewhere far away.
Антон!
Someone was looking for me, just like that boy who went missing. Tears stung my eyes. A big drop fell from my lashes.
Антон!
The scream was closer now, and for a moment I even believed that I was about to be saved.
Я здесь!
The light hit my face. I covered it with my hand. Flashlight's ray slid down.
Антон! Вот ты где! Ты совсем сдурел? Это вообще как понимать?
My dad walked out from the shadows. I went toward him, hoping that he won't melt, that he's not another trick that my insane mind played on me. He turned out to be real, warm, and alive.
Язык проглотил?
Do you not see his face?
Я встретил твою одноклассницу на дороге. Она сказала...
Branches cracked in the distance. I pressed myself into my father's chest, engulfed by fear. And he started looking around, alerted. And spoke in a tone of voice that was much more nervous.
Так, пойдем отсюда скорее. Мать узнает, такой нагоняй нам устроит, мало не покажется.
I reached out for my father, still feeling the chilling embrace of fear. I grabbed his firm hand, felt his quick pulse with my fingertips. Then stood up and wobbled along behind my father, following his barely discernible footprints. Back to civilization, back to light, back to the road where my dad parked his car.
Чтобы дома ни слова, ясно? Ни единого намека, где я тебя нашел.
Да, пап.
So, but that's also why I thought that going home with Polina would be a good idea. Like when you wondered if you shouldn't go alone. At least she was there to go tell someone what happened. That's more important than your pride of being seen getting beaten up. Yeah. He was holding my hand as if it was the most precious thing in the world, and kept telling me how afraid he is to lose me or Olya. I nodded and moved my legs. Only when we got to the car, Dad noticed my scratches.
Тебя били?
I felt up my cheek.
Подрался.
Из-за чего?
Из-за девушки.
Dad replied with a thoughtful nod. That's it? Good talk, bro. I heard the low hum of the engine. My dad wore a fearful expression. It wasn't that sticky fear that paralyzed me in the nightmare, though. His fear was noble, like crystal clear diamond. He opened the glove box and got some napkins out of there.
Драться за девушку – это правильно.
I don't know about that, but okay.
Да, нужно решать конфликт словами, но иногда слова не помогают.
Dad flashed an encouraging smile at me. Right as he was about to close the glove box, I noticed a handle peeking from under a rock. He was carrying a gun around. My dad, a true intellectual, had a pistol with him, like an action movie hero. Or like an ordinary thug, some voice whispered to me. Pines were flying by in the window. The car's light was struggling against the darkness. The car carried me back home. Dad was cautiously studying me in the back mirror. I was thinking about the gun, about my dreams, about people in animal masks that pretended to be my parents. And the white snowflakes just kept dancing in the starry sky.
не запылились.
Mom was going down the stairs, piercing Dad with her trademark glare. Her face showed something between wrath and condescension. Suddenly, her gaze shifted to me and stayed for a dangerously long time.
Так, я не поняла. Антон, а где очки? Потерял?
Да в школе поди забыл, простофиля.
A venomous pause followed.
Весь в тебя.
Dad glared at Mom and then mischievously winked at me, reminding me of our deal.
Ну ничего, есть же запасные. Проживем как-нибудь.
My parents stood in silence a bit longer, and the both of them went to mind their own business. Wait, did she still... even if he wiped off the blood, he would still have injuries on his face? Parents of the year. Olga threw herself into my arms before I could even take off my coat.
А я лису видела!
Surprise akin to a shotgun blast. I could only flap my lips in reply. A cup shattered into many little pieces with a loud thang. My mom let it fall from my hands. Her face was pale and her eyes were glued to the ground. This pause, just a split second, felt like an eternity. Then my mom spoke with disappointment.
То сова, то лиса. Когда ж тебе надоест?
Правда, правда! Такая пушистая! Она у забора стояла на задних лапах, совсем как человек. Она меня позвала, а тут мама вышла, и лиса убежала.
Не было там никакой лисы. Не выдумывай.
Не подходи к ней.
If it was necessary, I was ready to shake my sister as if she was a doll made of cloth.
Ты чего, Тоша?
Не подходи, слышишь?
Mom entered the hallway and gave me a surprised look. I hesitated.
Ну, лиса ведь укусить может.
I remembered fairy tales where foxes used to kidnap children. I imagined Alyssa, liberated, carnivorous, running through the night forest with a dangling sack in her hands.
Это ж была не настоящая лиса. Расскажи ему, Оль.
Она на двух ногах ходила, а еще была в платье одета. Только она была взаправду.
Видишь?
Mom showed us a tired smile, as if it was the only explanation needed. I also forced myself to smile. My smile was like a thin piece of soap, right before it dissolves completely on your palm. But when I was left alone with my sister, I whispered.
Еще раз увидишь ее, беги.
Memories about my family and disgusting masks attacked bombarded me like the underhanded blows of my classmates. The furry faces of my family stood before my eyes, their toothy mouths full of thick saliva. What's happening to me? What kind of tricks is my mind playing on me? This bunny mask was real. It just appeared in my school bag out of nowhere, as if I never threw it away in the forest. I shut my eyes and threw the vitamins in my mouth, washed them down with water. Please, stop driving me mad. Please. I barely managed to force myself to do homework, but those math problems just refused to be solved. Numbers in my notebook tumbled around and mixed in a whirling dance, sometimes running over the lines. My head became heavy from that pandemonium, and I almost dropped it into that chain of numbers. My eyelids felt like there were tiny weights tied to them, the type used in grocery stores. And right at the moment I surrendered and closed my notebook, the memories of my day started flashing before my eyes. I was in the middle of the stuffy school corridor. I could see the literature classroom from here, the faces of dead classical writers on their portraits, the prim and regal pose of our homeroom teacher, Lilia Pavlovna. And around that corner was her daughter Katya, a snitch and a gossip, eagerly waiting for me.
Эй, новенький, новенький.
Чего тебе, Кать?
She got on her tiptoes and started swaying while hiding her hands behind her back, and then asked me with a fake smile on her face.
Скажи, пожалуйста, а чего это тебя к нам перевели, а?
I might have told the truth about this to Polina. But Katya will sell it on the market for 3 kopekas. It would be the same as printing all my thoughts and hanging them near Vova's picture for everyone to see. So I reverted to an answer I knew by heart.
Это все из-за моих родителей. У папы тут новая работа, а мама...
But Katya didn't even listen to me, just rushed toward the perked up ears of her friends, whispered something while stealing glances at me and giggling.
Да-да, конечно, конечно. У нас тут совсем за дурачков держит. Я вот слыхала, что это все из-за его отца. Он недавно кому-то крутому дорогу перешел, и теперь они всей своей семейкой в нашем захолустье скрываются.
Неправда! Ты все врешь!
А слышали, как ему Бабурин всыпал? А этот лишь ручки опустил, да глазенки потупил.
Прекрати! Ты знаешь, он не один был!
И будто этого мало. Ходят слухи, что этот чудик повсюду таскает с собой заячью маску. Ой, девочки, ну кто же в своем уме будет такое делать? Ясно, понятно. Со странностями наш Антошка. Может, слабоумный, а может и маньяк. Если в его портфеле хорошо покопаться, там и топор отыскать можно. А может, да-да-да.
Замолчи! Заткнись!
Вон как раскричался-то, будто ужаленный. А зрачки какие широкие. Опять чего доброго с катушек слетит и руки распускать начнет. Не зря же его мать с таблетками пичкает.
I just stood there in confusion, trying in vain to understand how she found out about my medicine. And what scared me even more was the possibility that her nonsense had some truth mixed in.
Да-да. Он такой же ненормальный, как и его сестрица. Представляете, к этой сумасшедшей дурочке каждую ночь прилетает сова ростом с человека. Только что-то ее никто из здоровых людей не видел. А этот наивный простак ей верит. Нет, ну вы представляете?
And then I caught a single kind look from the smirking crowd.
Как же так, Антон? Неужели действительно тебе не здоровится?
Полина, послушай меня!
Как же? Не слушай этого болтуна, Полиночка. Свистит он, что в Москве бывал, как пить дать. Это ничтожество даже постоять за себя не может.
Excuse you, I did. Twice.
А при случае и за тебя не заступится. Бросит, думая, как бы только самому по шее не схлопотать. Слабак.
Polina slouched as if someone kicked her in the stomach, and then burst out in tears and fell to the dirty floor, wailing and screaming.
Антон! Почему? За что?
Is this another dream? I couldn't understand her reaction, but I still rushed to Polina's side before getting shoved violently by Katya.
Убери от нее свои лапы, чудовище!
Rage was building up under the veil of my fear. It slowly rose from the cloudy mist. I felt my upper lip lift creep up, showing my teeth.
То, что твой отец бьет мать, еще не дает тебе права поднимать руку на девушку!
My fists became hammers. I couldn't unclench them. Nobody can speak about my family like that. I came to my senses when I already lunged at the angry Katya.
Ага! Слетел-таки! Слетел! Спасите! Помогите! Петров с катушек слетел!
At the same moment, the crowd around her became louder. It started whistling and roaring. And glowing. The subtle silhouettes of my schoolmates became larger, wider. They shot upward toward the ceiling. Turned into a giant black forest, chock full of toothy faces. I shrank to a tiny ball of fur and started shaking in fear before the might of ulcer-ridden trunks that belonged to either trees or humans. It was impossible to tell.
Вот ты и показал свое животное нутро! Трус!
Katya's face was twisted with jubilation and ecstasy.
Антон! Почему? Нет! За что?
Polina screamed while choking on her tears.
Он! Животное! Чужак!
A scary flapping of wings came from the forest. A pair of giant white ears descended somewhere from above, and I dug myself into them.
Антон! Антон!
Пожалуйста! Вставай!
I jumped up, almost falling out of bed. Apparently, I was thrashing around for hours on the sweat-soaked sheets. Olya's scream pulled me out, set me free from the tentacles of fear.
Антон! Пожалуйста! Вставай! Вставай!
It took my eyes a while to focus on the silhouette near the window. Olya's voice was distant. My head was still ringing after the fight. Sounds got distorted, as if my ears were stuffed with cotton. My sister, as distressed as ever, just kept on repeating the same phrase.
Сова! Сова! Пожалуйста! Я боюсь!
Her tears poured on my heart like boiling water, but I was almost thankful for the owl's appearance. Otherwise, the scared Olya wouldn't have woken me up.
Оля, я сейчас. Хочешь, я тебе Мурзилку почитаю?
Morozilka, a Soviet and Russian monthly illustrated magazine for kids. It has been published since 1924. The magazine uses an unidentified yellow creature wearing a scarf and a red beret as its mascot. Writers like Samuel Marshak and Agnia Barto contributed to the magazine early in their careers. No idea what that is.
Подожди.
I placed my bare heels on the cold floor, felt around for my glasses. Remembered Semyon his underhanded act inside.
Антон! Пожалуйста! Пожалуйста! Посмотри!
She couldn't tear her eyes off the window, as if it was a staring contest. I found the light switch with my hand. The lamp poured bright light all over me. I got up. My vision fooled me, moving the window closer only to push it farther the next moment. My sister was just a blurry spot. I took a hesitant step forward.
Оль, что там? Что-то случилось? Ты хочешь, чтобы я открыл шторы?
Нет, не надо! Там же сова!
The voice was coming from behind. I turned around and froze from terror. Teary-eyed Olya stood in the doorway.
С кем ты разговаривал, братик?
She stared at me with eyes that were red from crying, with her hands wrapped around her shoulders. Her voice was nervous, as if she was afraid to hear my answer.
Я разговаривал с тобой, с тем, кто притворился тобой.
The ledge outside my windows creaked ominously, as if something huge was sitting on top of it. And the thing that pretended to be Olya started spreading, changing shape, grew to scary heights under the light of a carnivorous moon. The voice didn't belong to my sister anymore. The thing that was hiding behind my curtains got tired of pretending, making me look like a fool. I pinched myself as hard as I could, hoping that the silhouette near the window was just a continuation of my nightmare, a hallucination brought upon by the cursed house. And those don't bite, do they? The silhouette was towering before me under the veil of mist. I heard Olya's shrill scream when someone had knocked on the window.
Она пришла за нами!
Another knock. I stepped back into the middle of the room, as if there existed nooks where I could hide from this horror. The sound was sharp, metallic. The lamp started shimmering, then it suddenly lighted the whole and went out like a candle under a strong wind. The filament inside it snapped with a ringing sound. The darkness that was waiting for that exact moment poured from all the angles and enveloped me. There was only this window left in the whole universe. Moonlight poured through it, painting everything the color of bones that were exhumed from a crypt. Olya started squealing and pressed herself into my back, seeking protection. And then an eye, burning with a carnivorous fire, stared at us from the window. No, it wasn't trying to break the window. It was toying with us. It just kept on knocking, driving us mad. As if a giant clock was measuring the time left for us, its pendulum swinging above the abyss.
Уходи! Убирайся! Пошла прочь!
She was screaming in desperation, her hands clutching my arm like a pair of pincers. I could barely make out a pair of wings that spread out above the black spot.
Скажи ей, Антон! Скажи, что я больше не буду себя плохо вести! Никогда! Только пусть она уйдет! Пожалуйста!
The moonlight suddenly disappeared, and the room descended into darkness. We couldn't see the burning eye anymore. I swallowed the stinky lump that was stuck in my throat. I stepped toward the curtains, entranced by the call of this disfigured guest.
Не буду, не буду, не буду, не буду!
Olio was standing behind me, mumbling, "I'll be good, I'll be good, I'll be good." The bleak window was creeping closer. Curtains rustled. I reached out to move them aside, so I could look my fear in the eye. At that moment, I heard noise coming from our parents' bedroom. Without thinking, I pulled the curtain to the side in one swing. Nothing. Though there was something shining on the latch amongst the scattered feathers. My glasses. The ones that Simeon took from me. How did they get here? Was that a gift from the gurgling night? Did that owl really bring them here? I looked at the front yard, at the foreboding clearing, at the toothy forest. Not a soul, not a trace of our late-night guest. Only the old lamppost, dreaming like a lone watchman among the snowy desert. The dry window frame creaked. I tore away the insulating tape and the stipes of glued newspaper. Window insulation. Before plastic windows became widely accessible in Russia, the cracks and frames of wooden windows were filled with cotton or pieces of cloth and sealed with self-adhesive tapes or strips of newspaper soaked in soapy water to conserve heat in winter. Opened the window with big trouble. Frost pinned me with its little needles. The paintings on my walls moved from the draft. I touched my glasses, sure they would melt in my hands. But they were real. My brain was scrambling for an explanation. Simeon and his gang just pulled a prank on me. That was it. That's it. A smooth white blanket was glittering under the street lamp just outside our yard. If anybody was to get close to the house, to climb the pipe to the ledge of my window, they would surely leave footprints. But there were none. I cautiously took my glasses. My wrist was still intact. Nobody pulled me into the darkness, full of restless writhing.
Вы почему не спите?
I swayed from surprise and almost fell out of the window.
Совсем сдурели? Жарко, что ли? Не болели давно?
Там сова была! Тоша ее прогнал!
А ну-ка марш спать к себе в комнату! А с тобой...
Mom paused, directing her seething eyes at me. She was thinking of a punishment equivalent to my crime. In the end, she just waved her hand, took Olya by the shoulder and left, throwing gloomy words my way.
Завтра поговорим.
I managed to get the frame back in place with a couple of hits, pressed in the latches with all the strength my fingers could muster. The cold left the room, but the fear was still present. I placed my glasses on my nose and started studying my reflection in the window. It didn't look like a face, more like a death mask. just like the one worn by the boy from the notice board. That night, I was on the edge of joining him there. A black and white face was staring at me through the clearing between student heads. And it wasn't Vova. His face was right beside it. I recognized the fat cheeks, the damaged skin. Semyon. Semyon Baburin, 13 years old, grade 6B. He left for school on the morning of January 16th and never returned. 155 to 160 centimeters tall, chubby, brown hair and grey eyes. Was wearing a dark brown sheepskin coat, a beige scarf, a black mink hat, and Alaska boots. Please call these numbers. Police and Semyon's grandma. Baburin's photo was printed out and placed under the glass, like an exhibition piece. That was it for episode 2. Let me quickly save. Okay. So, that episode was a lot longer than I thought it would be. I thought they all were about 2 hours, which is already pretty long. I know, especially for YouTube videos. I know many people prefer to have the shorter ones so they can watch them in one sitting. But for me it works better doing longer ones, but well, if you follow me, you know I don't upload every day, but like twice a week if I can. But yeah, that was way longer than I thought it would be. Yeah, what did you think? I think the audio is still a bit tricky just because the levels of the game sound itself do vary. Like even just the voices, sometimes they're loud, sometimes they're not. And I know that audio mixing isn't like an easy task at all. But still, it's a bit strange. I hope it's not too grating. I think I will turn one of the settings down next time again with the oh, now I can think of the word, but especially like those first the crunching sounds when we met the fox. That was probably quite loud for y'all and quite disgusting. I am also a little bit bothered by all the typos that were in this episode, but again, this game is still in early access officially, so it is what it is. I mean, the translation isn't bad or anything, it's just, yeah, more like typos here and there, but they were a lot more noticeable than in the last episode. Yeah, I hate bullies. Bullies are almost worse than all these other nightmares that Anton has, just because it's real. I mean, that's what it always feels like to me, that anything that is grounded in reality feels a lot worse than any fantastical horrors that would happen in games or movies, etc. Of course, I don't want this to happen in real life. I think we're all on the same level there. But yeah. Any thoughts from your side I would appreciate. Would you have gone with Paulina or Alyssa? Again, I don't know how much the plot would change. If we had gone with Alyssa, we would still have gone into the forest, right? So, would we have still been beaten up by that gang? Or would then Alyssa have been able to defend us? Interesting. I mean, as always, I have the game linked down below in the description if you want to check out any other paths this game may have. Yeah, but this is it from me for episode 2. I would appreciate if you left me your thoughts and comments down below, if you left me a thumbs up, and subscribe to my channel to get notified about the next update. But yeah, until next time, Thank you so much for watching. Bye bye!